In the history of this very channel, the one thing I excelled the most at was talking about the perfect villain, highlighting several different characters that I would think fall under that definition for going above and beyond before I decided to title these videos differently since I was just doing the same thing. That villains are more than just simple titles that you don't put out for the sake of it, and I wanted to change that. But it doesn't mean I changed my mind that most of them are good or perfect villains where they have their own strengths and weaknesses. But today, finally with what's coming, I thought it was time to bring this title back out of the shadows yet again, for a character who embodies this entire concept with what was designed for an idea that is never achievable in our world except if you are God himself. Where yes, I am absolutely talking about CLU from Tron Legacy, the program created by the main protagonist Kevin Flynn to create the perfect system and remove anything considered imperfect. And Tron is something I really want to talk about and cover on this channel because it's one of my most favorite franchises. With Legacy of course being one of my most favorite sequels, where the original is appreciated for bringing the use of CGI to what it is today. And both now remain to be cult classics that brought us into the digital age, showing us inside the realm of computers that kinda remains so relevant today. Where I wanted to start out small talking about villains again, with the first major live action original Disney villain that I will talk about at all on this channel that rivals the best that animation has to offer. After all, his face is still technically animated for bringing a de-aged version of Jeff Bridges to the screen that doesn't actually look that great in today's standards, but actually just enough to still be great. Because when you actually think about the ultimate goal regarding perfection and living in a digital system, you actually accept why he looks so imperfect as a strength to his character trying to create the perfect system through the worst possible means. That it represents in one way the stagnant arrogance of man at one stage in his life to believe he could go farther than what he could really do or understand about the world that is more destructive rather than creative in the way Kevin Flynn originally thought. Because if you notice, in the world of Tron, every program is based upon their user. They are all digital reflections of our own selves as representative of our own work and the artificial intelligence they carry out with each of their tasks. This actually begins in the original Tron since CLU is actually a newer version of a program Kevin made to hack the income system, which is much different than the one we will learn about since it was more basic, more robotic in the nature that he acts and speaks, other than appearing just like Kevin and having a yellow circuitry to differentiate from the outside nature of the system. And moreover, because Tron itself was based upon the world of computing, the name CLU, which actually stands for Codified Likeness Utility, was actually based on the named program language designed in the mid-70s, which paved the way and influenced well more known programs like C++ and Python and so much more. That it kind of demonstrates his importance in these movies when he's based on something substantial in the computing world, even if it's not exactly like that when you first search for Flynn's stolen games before the movie's main villain, the Master Control Program, stopped him from doing so and de-resed him to take his powers. Of course, until Kevin came along in the story and defeated him once and for all, where these very experiences in the first translated over to him creating his own new system in Legacy, needing to have help with a brand new CLU designed to create such a perfect system. That Kevin's experiences in the game grid of Incom encouraged him to search for perfection, the digital frontier to reshape the human condition as we all know it, where Tron started to get these interesting concepts about life and how the digital world becomes more prevalent in our society. But as he tried to carry out his task, came the introduction of species like the ISOs, isomorphic algorithms that simply came into creation within the grid itself, changing all ideas about life we've ever had to Flynn's surprise. That this was the miracle he was going to give to the world as spoken to his own son and was determined to see it through, a change he never saw coming but gladly accepted. But CLU, being designed to create the perfect system, saw something that wasn't created to a structured design, introducing things that chaotically exist without any specific order, or orders as most of these programs would be used to. He saw them as a threat and decided to turn against Flynn and Tron because of their devotion to this on the orders that Kevin agreed that he would still be able to create the perfect system, embracing his yellow hue and staging a coup to cement complete control. In the process, he damaged Tron and eventually repurposed him to his own enforcer to rule the grid for so many cycles while committing genocide against the ISOs as all the work Kevin tried to do. This was the turning point where they separated as individuals since they still are both the same person but with different changing viewpoints. One is a human who thought he changed things when it finally changed itself in front of him, and the other is a program who seeks to arrange it to his own definitions. It is the dark side of every person who chases after something without realizing what life finally brings strings as he come to understand after years of being stuck in the grid and away from his own son as events of the movies play out. While Flynn learned to live without hoping to return to the real world, CLU became more erratic and frustrated being stuck down here when he could have done much more, like his own former user would, saying it would be to find their destiny, that he wanted to perfect the real world this time and had to escape by any means necessary, like sending a page to Alan Bradley who would inform Sam of this and let him enter the grid to escape. One of the great things about this introduction when Sam finally meets him for the first time is how he's both a very sophisticated program greeting Sam with such swag and personality like a regular human compared to other programs including his older self with his voice, but also still cold like an artificial being who cares nothing of Sam but his end goal, differentiating himself from Kevin on their characterizations of villains and heroes, kind and compassionate and cold and disheartened. Like he really has fun with this stuff, toying with his own creator's son to try to even kill him off and then find ways to torture programs against his own will, where perfection requires them to be as stiff as their own computer-generated face at times, represented through this tyrannical rule he holds on all beings throughout this realm, that you realize as Kevin Flynn is the creator, he can also be in charge of every single program, and clues that reflection of what he can do if he took complete control. And when you realize this fact, you can see how the effects of his face can still really age well within the story because of his attitude and the computer-generated basis in the literal sense. Again, in contrast to when Sam finally meets Kevin when he's much older and happier to meet his own son after so long, so many cycles with so much emotion, showing him to be the more wiser and more peace-seeking individual that lets the way of the world guide him rather than seeks to control it for himself, demonstrated by going back and forth between him and the CLU out in the open when he's so impatient for Flynn to make the next move, where, as you know, he does later on when he finds out his son went out into the city and makes a run for it to get out of here and jump the portal, where he finally discovers his secret hideout and looks down upon his reflection, remembering his own creation and his purpose, where they do tend to make it a big deal in this film since he was that reflection with the same exact clothes with Flynn before his current appearance, because they just wanted to show that he's exactly the same person despite being two separate beings, who just does rage at the fact he felt hurt since Kevin betrayed his own ideas, where you can see he does have this very sensitive side where he looks and acts like another son to Kevin Flynn alongside Sam himself, which he gets jealous at Sam for what he has been given, which he didn't, and causes a tantrum to get his own way. Like how this reflection is also perfectly represented on the ship where he has repurposed programs to follow his will and perform an eerily similar speech to Kevin at the beginning where this new world is their destiny, saying that out there rather than in as a representation to how the system was created in the computer world. And like Kevin, he did find a way to get out of the world bringing this army with him, which obviously would establish the basis of the upcoming Tron Ares movie and introduce programs in our society. But his arrogance is also what ultimately blinds him, still chasing after perfection, just like Kevin said to his son when he realizes he should have just given it up to spend one more day with Sam, where his son steals the disc back and takes Cora along to head to the portal while he stares in frustration and chases them down once again. Whereas each of his guards fail and Tron turns back to the light, he still remains to be the only one left to ready to stop and face his creator once again to explain his actions. That he confronts Kevin on the basis of betrayal, just like he feels when he committed to this coup, the same person feeling at fault for his own decisions that goes against his ideals both old and new. This entire speech that both go through is probably one of the greatest in films, as it self-admitted to one that they're sorry for not seeing or being more there for themselves, when the world actually had much more to offer than what was once thought. Of course, CLU still hits him at this point because he cannot take all the years he was built up only for it to be a lie. Like he's really not going to accept what he says now, because imagine spending your entire life thinking you perfect something only for your own creator to say that it was wrong this whole time. Or more specifically in this case, just go back in time to say to your younger self that it was just the wrong path to do. It would just genuinely hurt you because you thought one way, but it changed into something else you'd never expected. Where he still cannot believe what exactly Flynn does when he carries Cora's disc instead of his own just for his son to live. Where he probably thought the same thing, just wanting to change the world with himself, but also could never understand with his imperfect decisions. His imperfect design that represents the arrogance of an individual thinking they could do no wrong. Where that's why both had to be reintegrated within each other, with Kevin's apparent death to de-res CLU because he just never could understand what is in life. Where in the end, CLU represents everything that Kevin learned from the first film on the opposite end of the spectrum. The bad thing about seeking perfection when it really does not exist no matter how hard you try. You may have these special abilities and can create a perfect system that runs as smoothly as possible, but that doesn't mean it's it's free to flourish like all life has done. Doesn't mean you're right in what perfection is, because it's just unknowable, impossible to actually see, but how it comes out itself rather than what you can do specifically. Like looking back on the original film, it's easy to see where CLU actually came from, other than his old program, from these bright young genius who wanted his work back and figured he could change things with his own adventures, but how programs are just limited to perform certain tasks and cannot change outside their own parameters. Where thinking about it all is actually really perfect for both a character and a villain standpoint to share with what we all know so well in the end, where CLU is just literally the perfect villain. One of the best that Disney has ever created, and should be remembered for that when we think of a certain goal or desire and the importance of change in our lives. That we should always strive to be better, and we can, rather than the limits we sometimes put on ourselves. Anyways, I'm all done. End of line.